In 1995, a father and son vanished on Minnesota's Leech Lake during what should have been a routine morning fishing trip. Local authorities searched for weeks, but found nothing. No boat, no bodies, no answers. The case went cold, and the family was left to wonder if they'd simply gotten lost in a storm or suffered some tragic accident. But in March 2002, a routine lake dredging project struck something metallic 30 feet below the surface. What they pulled up would shatter everything everyone believed about that morning and expose a dark truth that had been deliberately buried beneath the waves. Detective Emily Roberts' phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. on a gray March morning in 2002. 9 years on the force had taught her that early calls meant trouble. "Roberts, you need to get down to Leech Lake. A dredging crew pulled up a boat with bullet holes through the hull." 20 minutes later, Roberts stood on the dock watching a small aluminum boat emerge from 30 feet of dark water. Lake weeds clung to the metal, and murky water poured from holes that looked too clean, too round to be from rocks or debris. The boat registration was still partially visible through the grime, MN 4429TX. Roberts pulled out her phone and called dispatch. "Run a boat registration for me, Minnesota 4429, Texas." 2 minutes later, her blood went cold. "Damn," she whispered. "That's Mike Williams's boat." May 15, 1995. Mike Williams kissed his wife Linda goodbye at 5:30 a.m., coffee still steaming on the kitchen's counter. At 52, Mike had been fishing Leech Lake for 30 years, longer than some of the trees had been growing on its shores. "We'll be back by noon with a cooler full of walleye," he promised, watching through the window as his 19-year-old son Tyler loaded their gear into the aluminum fishing boat. Tyler was home from the University of Minnesota for the weekend, trading textbooks for tackle boxes. Father and son had been planning this trip for weeks. Just the two of them on the water, Mike knew better than his own backyard. They launched from Portage Bay at 6:15 a.m. under perfect fishing conditions. Calm water, overcast skies, light breeze from the southwest. It was the last time anyone saw them alive. When they didn't return by 2 p.m., Linda started calling around. By 4 p.m., she was at the sheriff's office. By sunset, search boats were combing every inch of Leech Lake's 112,000 acres. For 3 weeks, helicopters circled overhead while dive teams probed the deeper waters. Volunteers with sonar equipment worked around the clock. The Coast Guard brought in specialized recovery vessels. They found nothing. "It's like they just vanished," Sheriff Jim Morrison told reporters, his voice heavy with frustration. The official theory became tragic but simple. Sudden weather, capsized boat, bodies lost in the lake's deepest waters. But Mike Williams knew these waters like his own reflection. And Tyler was a strong swimmer who'd lifeguarded at the local beach every summer since he was 16. Detective Roberts inherited the Williams file when she transferred to Cass County in 2000. Cold cases were her specialty. The puzzles other cops couldn't solve, the families who deserved answers. She'd read every report, studied every witness statement, walked every inch of shoreline where debris might have washed up. Something about the case nagged at her. Mike Williams was legendarily cautious on the water. The weather that morning had been ideal. His usual fishing spots were all in relatively shallow areas. And then there were the details that didn't fit. Several witnesses had reported unusual boat traffic in the weeks before the disappearance. Fast boats running at odd hours, strangers who didn't look like fishermen, hushed conversations at the marina. But with no physical evidence, the trail had gone stone cold. Until now. The forensics team worked methodically, photographing every detail before moving the boat to dry land. Even after 7 years underwater, the evidence was unmistakable. Roberts counted at least 6 holes punched through the aluminum hull, 3 below what would have been the waterline, 3 more through the stern. The holes were too uniform, too clean. This wasn't debris damage. "These look like bullet holes," the forensics photographer said, adjusting his lens for a close-up shot. Inside the boat, they found Mike's waterproof tackle box still sealed, containing his wallet and fishing license from that morning. But wedged deep in the aluminum ribbing near the stern, Roberts spotted something that made her heart race: a brass shell casing, deformed but intact. "Bag this," Roberts told the evidence tech, "and get it to ballistics immediately." The boat's position when found also troubled her. According to the 1995 search records, teams had focused on the lake's deepest waters, near the main fishing channels. But this boat was found in a completely different area, the northeastern shallows, where weekend cabin owners kept their docks. Someone had moved it after it sank. The ballistics report came back 3 days later. .223 rifle round, fired from a weapon with distinctive rifling marks. Roberts ran the bullet signature through the national database. No matches, but she had other leads to follow. She pulled the 1995 case files and started mapping witness reports against boat registrations. Several people had mentioned unusual activity around Northwoods Marina in the weeks before the disappearance. The marina's owner, Trent Webb, had always been cooperative during the original investigation. Maybe too cooperative. Roberts drove out to the marina on a Thursday afternoon, but found it under new management. Webb had sold the business in 1999 and moved to Florida, citing health problems. That timing felt suspicious. When she pulled Webb's background, red flags started appearing everywhere. The marina had been profitable, well established. Why sell suddenly? And why had he left Minnesota entirely? More interesting was what she found in the federal database. Trent Webb had been questioned by the DEA in 1995, just 2 months after the Williams disappearance, about suspected drug trafficking. The investigation had been dropped due to lack of evidence. DEA agent Tom Davis agreed to meet Roberts at a diner halfway to Minneapolis. Over coffee, he filled in the pieces that local law enforcement had never been told. "Webb was smart," Davis explained. "We suspected he was using his marina as a distribution point for methamphetamine coming from Canadian suppliers. Boats would meet at predetermined coordinates on the lake, transfer packages, then return to the marina like normal fishing trips." The timeline fit perfectly. In the mid-1990s, rural methamphetamine trafficking was exploding across the upper Midwest. Remote lakes provided perfect cover for smuggling operations. Webb's marina was ideally positioned, Davis continued. He could monitor all boat traffic on the northern part of the lake. If someone got too curious about unusual activity happening at dawn, Roberts felt the pieces clicking into place. Mike Williams, with 30 years of experience on Leech Lake, would have noticed boats that didn't belong. He would have seen patterns that others missed. "What happened to your investigation?" Roberts asked. Davis's expression darkened. "Every witness we lined up either recanted their statement or suddenly left town. 3 potential informants moved out of state within months. We couldn't prove Webb was intimidating people, but the message was clear." "And the shell casing?" "That changes everything. Now you've got physical evidence and a murder case." Trent Webb wasn't difficult to find. Despite claims of health problems, he was living comfortably in a waterfront condo in Tampa, operating a small boat repair business. When U.S. Marshals knocked on his door with a federal warrant, Webb's face went ashen. He'd been expecting this day for 7 years. Back in Minnesota, seated across from Roberts in the interview room, Webb initially maintained his innocence. But Roberts had done her homework on federal sentencing guidelines. "The .223 casing matches your registered rifle, Trent. But here's what you need to understand. We're not just building a murder case. We're building a federal RICO conspiracy that's going to put you away for life without parole." She slid a thick folder across the table. "Drug kingpin statute, interstate trafficking, money laundering, murder in furtherance of a continuing criminal enterprise. Even without Mike and Tyler's bodies, you're looking at dying in federal prison. Webb's face went ashen as he scanned the charges. But, Roberts continued, the federal prosecutor is interested in the bigger picture. Your Canadian suppliers, the money laundering network, other distribution points across 3 states. You're not the top of this food chain, and we both know it. She leaned forward. Give us everything: names, locations, financial records, communication methods, and we'll recommend substantial cooperation credit. Life without parole becomes 15 to 20 with possibility of parole. Your family gets immunity instead of RICO conspiracy charges. Webb stared at the federal sentencing guidelines, knowing the mathematics were brutal. He could die in prison protecting people who'd abandon him the moment he was arrested, or he could trade information for a chance to see his grandchildren someday. I want to make a deal, he finally said. Webb's story unraveled 7 years of lies. His network had moved millions of dollars in methamphetamine through Minnesota's lake system. Canadian suppliers used fishing boats to transport drugs across the border, making drops at predetermined coordinates. Webb's marina provided legitimate cover while he monitored lake traffic for potential problems. The Williams were in the wrong place at the wrong time, Webb said. That morning, they positioned themselves right between my boat and a scheduled pickup. They saw everything: the packages, the money, boats that had no business being there. Mike Williams had been heading toward shore when Webb intercepted them. There had been a confrontation. Webb claimed he'd only meant to scare them, but when Mike threatened to report what he'd seen, Webb's associates made it clear: eliminate the problem or become one. I used my cabin cruiser to force their boat toward deeper water, Webb confessed. When they tried to turn back, I opened fire, made sure their boat would sink, then towed what was left to the shallows and let it go down there. The bodies, he claimed, had been weighted and dropped in the deepest part of the lake. The plea hearing lasted 2 days. Webb's detailed confession and cooperation against his associates, combined with physical evidence and Davis's testimony, resulted in a 25-year plea agreement instead of life without parole for double murder and federal drug trafficking charges. Webb's arrest led to something bigger. Federal agents arrested 8 additional suspects across 3 states, seizing over $13 million in assets and shutting down a trafficking network that had operated for over a decade. For Linda Williams, who'd spent 7 years wondering, the verdict brought mixed emotions. Standing outside the courthouse, clutching the wedding ring found in Mike's waterproof tackle box, she struggled to find words. I'm grateful to finally know the truth, she said, voice trembling. But knowing they died because they were good men who would have done the right thing, it doesn't make the pain any less. Detective Roberts stood at the edge of Leech Lake as the sun set, the same waters that had hidden the truth now reflecting the orange sky. 2 good men had died simply for being in the wrong place when criminals needed to stay hidden. But truth, like objects lost in deep water, eventually rises to the surface, especially when dedicated people refuse to stop searching for answers. The lake kept its secrets for 7 years. But in the end, justice has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it.